Hello, good afternoon, Pam. Thank
Hi, Leila.
Hi,
Wonderful to be with you.
lovely. Thank you so much for joining me today with Gracing Life, and thank you for preparing. And I know I asked you in a very short notice, but thank you for being here with me today.
It's a pleasure.
Lovely. So I just want to tell our viewers a bit more about you. That you've been in the corporate world for a while, and then you've moved on to astrology for the last 44 years. You're also an author. Is that two books that you've written?
Yes, it is. Yes. You don't really believe in astrology, do you? Was my first one, and the second one, How to Co-create Using the Secret Language of the Universe.
Wow, wow. And how did you find writing these books?
Loved it. I just disappeared down a rabbit hole and I absolutely loved it. That's often when I'm at my happiest, actually, just going very deep into a subject and meditating, thinking and researching. So yeah, I really loved it. There may be more to come, but I just need a bit of a break for a while before I get back into writing. But it's something I love to do.
Wow, so I'm so fascinated by your work, and I've been following you for over a few years now on Facebook. I've been watching your videos on YouTube. I've even used your tools on your website. So I'm extremely happy and extremely grateful to be in space with you today.
Fantastic. No, it's a joy to share time with you.
Thank you so much. So I was just saying to you before we went live that, we went on record, that the reason why I'm inspired to do this interview with you today, because I know there are people, and in my practice, there are some people that I work with who don't really understand astrology. And I feel like these subjects are becoming spoken about more on a regular basis. People are starting to know more about, Mercury retrograde, about the lunar eclipse, and, but I just don't feel like people are maybe understanding a lot more. And this is why I'm inspired to come and ask you a few questions today.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy to do that.
So tell us more about your journey. How did you start on your journey of astrology?
Um, to be honest, I think I was always interested in spiritual matters from an incredibly young age, probably about the age of 7, actually. I was starting to read some, quite heavy stuff, I think, for a young child. And then it was really after I finished university, I emigrated to Canada, to Toronto. I joined a yoga class, and there was a chap there that one of the other girls said, he's an astrologer. So I went up to him at the end of the class and I said, look, I know nothing about this subject, but I'd love to have my chart done. And I went to see him a week later and I spent 7 hours with him. And it was like the universe had just cracked open, because I couldn't believe that there was this whole world of meaning that I'd been completely unaware of. And he could pinpoint dates and experiences and events in my life, my relationship with my parents and my work life. And, it was all there on that single piece of paper. And it blew my mind. And the detail, the level of detail was incredible. So from that moment, I dedicated myself to studying astrology. Initially, informally, I just taught myself in Toronto. But then when I came back to England, there's a very good faculty of astrological studies, and I studied with them for 8 years initially to get my diploma. And then I went on to do a master's course with Noel Till, which was fabulous. And yes, but I learn every day. I learn every day. I never stop learning, because it's such a profound and vast subject. I don't think any astrologer can say, right, I've cracked it, I now know everything. You never get to that point. It's infinite. And that's one of the wonderful things about it.
Wow. It must be quite hard to describe this to someone who doesn't know anything about astrology, or maybe doesn't believe in astrology. Is that right?
Well, that's why I wrote the first book, because often I'd be at a party and some slightly drunken public school gentleman would sidle up to me, and he'd have known about my work in the corporate world, but once he discovered I was an astrologer, he'd sort of whisper in a sort of conspiratorial way, you don't really believe in astrology, do you? So I was asked that question so many hundreds and probably thousands of times, I had to call the book that, because to say that you don't believe in astrology is like saying you don't believe in French. it's a nonsensical statement because it's just a language. It's a profound, symbolic, sacred, mathematical language. It's highly mathematical and geometric, but it's a language. So you can decide to use French in your life, you can decide to use astrology or not, but you can't say, I don't believe in it. And when I'm working with astrology, when I'm preparing a chart, I kind of feel the same clunking, as it were, in my brain as I do when I'm translating French. I'm translating symbolism and geometry when I'm working on a chart. So it's, to me, it's absolutely a language. And that's why, you know, people asking, you don't believe in astrology, just is absolutely nonsensical.
Wow. I mean, I do follow you, and I follow things about, you know, if you look with Cancer fault in your birth chart and what's your moon rising, and I know I'm Cancerian, but sometimes I get confused with, is my moon rising Cancerian or is my sun rising Cancerian? They seem to be the same thing. So not they are the same thing, obviously, but how do our planets affect us on an individual basis?
Okay, this answer could take several months, but I'll try and keep it concise. Essentially, your birth chart is, for me, almost like striking a tuning fork. That is the pattern that you are given for this lifetime. And it describes your relationship with the universe, essentially, for this lifetime. And each birth chart contains up to 3,000 variables. So when people come up to me and say, you know, I'm a Leo, tell me about myself. Well, you know, it's slightly more complicated than that. If it was that easy, it wouldn't have taken me 44 years so far. So it's much more complicated than that. But one of the most important things is the time of the birth. And people think astrologers are kind of crazy that they need to pin down the time. But the time determines the clock face, the orientation of all of the planets in the chart. And each of them will change their meaning as the clock face changes. So that's why pinning it down to the minute is so incredibly important. And that pinning it down to the minute, the moment of incarnation, is actually your ascendant. And it's the moment at which the ancient peoples believed that your spirit entered the body. So that is the degree of your ascendant. I mean, for me, it's 22 degrees of Scorpio. That's my ascendant. And that acts like a lens or a filter over your entire chart. It's the way the world sees you principally. It's the way you project yourself to the world. Way more important than your sun sign. Way more important. But each planet has a different meaning within itself, integral within itself, but also conditioned by the sign it's in and the house, the area of life that it's in the chart. And that's why it starts to get into a sort of 3-dimensional, probably a 30-dimensional matrix of meaning. What you're dealing with is meaning. And the synthesis of that becomes quite difficult. So the most important thing in the entire chart is your ascendant, because it colors everything else. Your sun is very different from your moon. The sun is the way you express energy. The moon is your instinctive self. It's much, much deeper. It's what you need to do on a regular daily basis to feel satisfied in your life. I mean, if you have the moon in Aries, you need to go climb a mountain. You need to run a marathon. You need to have a strong physicality. If you have the moon in Pisces, you need to sit and meditate with a candle and drink a herb tea. You know, your instinctive daily need is determined by the moon, not the sun. And the moon is incredibly important in relationships, live-in, together relationships, because if your moons aren't compatible, you may love each other madly, but it will be very hard to get your daily rhythm working well together. So the moon is one of the most important things.
Wow, that's pretty insightful. That just blew my mind away.
As I said, I could talk for months on that one answer.
That is a great answer. Thank you so much. That's just made me think I need to go to Amazon and really get your books out. so I know I used to work in the corporate world too. I used to work in the banking world, and I think most healers or people in the spiritual field always come from the corporate world, by the sounds of it.
Until they find their real path,
yeah. And I remember working with a guy. He was Hindu, And he told me he was getting married, but in order for him to get married, they're going to work out his chart, and then the lady has to be in some sort of same stars and something has. And I found it like, wow, really? And this is before I was doing healing, and I always thought, if only all our cultures had that same belief, maybe the divorce rate will be, less high.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very interesting that in Indian astrology, in Vedic astrology, the nodal axis of the moon is the most important thing in the whole chart. And in Western astrology, very little is written about it. And when I started to write my second book was actually going to be about something completely different. I wanted to dive much deeper into the whole quantum physics and the interrelationship of astrology with how reality is formed in the quantum field. That was my real area of interest. But I kept kind of being drawn down this rabbit hole of the nodal axis. And eventually the book, my second book, How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe, is principally about that nodal axis, because in relationship, it is profound that if you have a connection between your nodal axis and the other person's either nodal axis or planets, it's almost like eyes across a crowded room. It's, I know you from 1,000 years ago. I know you from way back. And even if the outer packaging of the person seems very wrong for you, very inappropriate for you, there will be this unfathomable sense of familiarity and knowing and loving that person. And so that is a huge piece of glue in a relationship. In fact, I'm putting out some tutorial videos, not for beginners, I want to say loudly, tomorrow. And some of that teaching it's about relationship, and some of that teaching is about the nodal axis. So it's so important. And I know in Indian astrology, it's one of the principal things they look for, and they should, because it's so powerful in terms of attraction and longevity in a relationship. But there are many other parts to relationship too.
Wow, I am so going to watch that, because I don't know what it is. I'm just so captivated by this right now, and it's just taking me into another question, jumping into another question. You're amazing to interview, and I love your energy and your knowledge, and you just have this fountain. It's so insightful. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
It's just made me question. So for me, I was told by an astrologer earlier this year that I am in an extreme karmic year in my birth chart, and I didn't really comprehend that you could have karma in your birth chart. So could you possibly have this karma in your birth chart with your soul contracts with other people? Will that be in your birth chart?
Yes, absolutely. And I think really that's probably the nodal axis they're talking about, because
Okay.
this lifetime is just one stitch in the soul's tapestry. The soul is eternal. The soul goes on. So the people that we are dancing and interacting with in this lifetime, almost certainly we have been with before in a previous lifetime or previous lifetimes. And one exercise, I've got a video companion series to go with the recent book, How to Co-Create. And one thing I've asked people to do as an exercise, which they've absolutely loved, is take their chart and the charts of their loved ones, maybe the charts of their children, and look at the links between their nodal axis and the other person's either nodal axis or planets, and equally, their loved ones' nodal axis back to their chart. And this has taken them on a profound journey. Now, there comes a point where astrology stops and intuition and meditation has to take over, but they may discover that their daughter was actually their mother last time around, and it deepens the loving bond between people so wonderfully. It's a very heartfelt process, and it's taken people on a very deep introspective journey of love to realize the people that they love in this lifetime have been in a completely different relationship with them in the past, and the dance goes on. The daughter may have been the parent. So it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Wow, that is pretty beautiful. I can imagine people who are watching this right now is thinking, I need Pam to do my birth chart, but you know, Pam is offline with her clients and she
I'm
cannot
just
see.
overwhelmed with clients. No, I'm going to say loudly, I can't take any more clients this year, just completely full up. So please don't write to me because, you know.
Yeah, but please do visit Pam's amazing channel on YouTube, and she's bringing lots of new tools out. Pam, if you were to do a course or if you were to open up a school one day, I will definitely be your first student.
Thank you. Well, I used to run a little school of astrology where I live, and people loved it. But gradually, in fact, I've only been thinking about this quite recently. Gradually, I've got quite a lot of tutorial videos already, and I'm putting out more tomorrow, as I say. And then gradually, I'm going to build up the modules so it becomes comprehensive in people's learning. But as I say, the tutorials I'm putting out tomorrow on relationship are a little more advanced. You know, if you're a beginner, just don't go there because you'll be lost. But the other modules take people from zero quite a long way in their understanding.
Okay.
So I will build up more video modules as I go, and they're all on the products page of pamgregory.com.
Great, great. So that's pamgregory.com. I will post the links for anyone who's watching after this so you know where to go. And you can also download your own birth chart on Pam Gregory's website. Now, I have a question which is related in our field, more of the spiritual healers and therapists. So I've read about Chiron, the healer, the wounded healer. And do you get lots of questions about this? Because I've just discovered this and I'm so like, wow, he was the wounded healer and we could have this in our birth charts.
Yes, I get lots of questions about everything actually, but yes, I do get a lot of questions about Chiron because it's an asteroid that was only discovered in 1979. So in astrological terms, that's very recent, and that was really the beginning of alternative medicine starting to be better recognized. You know, we now have chiropractic people, you know, so that became much more mainstream then. So there's a strong association with alternative healing, and to some extent I consider Chiron shamanic actually. Chiron in your chart is where you have a vulnerability, where there's a weakness when you're born. But if you work through, which is all of what your birth chart is all about, you know, that you work through and learn and grow, Chiron can become your greatest strength. You know, if I think of some of the great leaders in the past, many of them had Chiron in Aries. Gandhi, India, had Chiron Aries. Now, when you're born, that is very commonly, when you're very, very tiny, a sense of, I don't have a right to exist. And you can see why Gandhi might have felt that with the British Empire and all the rest. But ultimately, he became a leader, and that was very much part of Chiron's message. So we turn it around. You know, if we're working well and growing spiritually, your weakness becomes your strength. But I see Chiron very strongly, very prominently in the charts of healers and therapists. It's in a powerful position. You know, it's angular, it's on the ascendant, it's on the midheaven. And then you know that person has very strong healing energy.
Wow. So Chiron was the wounded healer. So I did say Chiron earlier. Let's just correct that. My vocabulary can just be off the hook sometimes. So if you have Chiron in your, because I know you get the healer, then you get the wounded healer. And sometimes being the wounded healer is not meant to be a very positive trait because you're healing out of trauma rather than healing the client. It's more of a gratification for yourself. Is that right?
Well, everybody has Chiron somewhere. You can't avoid it. You know, everybody has all of the planets plus Chiron in their charts. Okay. So you can't kind of duck it. And of course, so often people are drawn to the healing field if they've had to work through a lot of their own material, because that, you know, challenging childhood or illness or whatever it was has taken them on deeper pathways to want to start to help other people. So, you know, so often people have worked through their own stuff, and quite right too, that they can only start to help other people once they've worked through their own challenges. And Chiron is part, just only part of what will describe those challenges from childhood.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty insightful. I just got the book of Chiron, the healer in astrology, and I'm just in the process of reading that. So that's quite interesting. I mean, once I found, the desire to interview you, I was Googling some information. Oh my goodness, what was I just going to say? I was Googling the planets and, looking at how we could bring out the best of today. And what I wanted to ask, and I'm not sure if this is even relevant, but please do tell me, it's the moon and the changes that's going on in this whole year. So there seems to be an extreme amount of changes going on. I mean, we keep having retrogrades, we keep having, it's like one thing after another. And it's almost like I haven't felt so much shift before as it's been in 2018. And 2018 for me has been intense. It's been
You're not alone. Yeah, you're not alone in that. I mean, there's several reasons for that. First of all, I mean, July and August, certainly I knew, and most astrologers anticipated they were going to be very intense months because we had 3 eclipses over that period. We normally only have 2. In a 6-month period, we had 3. One of them was the most powerful total lunar eclipse of the century at 4 degrees of Aquarius. There's going to be nothing stronger than that. So that was absolutely immense. In mid-August, we had 7 planets moving retrograde. Now, I really, really want to explain what retrogradation is, because I had so many people writing to me in panic, is the world coming to an end? All it is an optical illusion. We have all had the experience of pulling out of a station on a train, and our train is moving very slightly faster than the train on the next track. And as we look out of the window, the train next to us seems to be going backwards. It isn't. It's going forwards, just more slowly than we are. That is retrogradation. It's an optical illusion. Planets never move backwards. They only ever move forwards. And the symbolic principle of that is integration of whatever that symbolism of the planet is about, and introspection. And if you look on your birth chart, look to all the planetary symbols, the ones that have a little capital R at the bottom of them, that means they were retrograde at the time of your birth. And I've scarcely known anyone who doesn't have some retrograde planets. It's extremely rare not to have retrograde planets of some kind. Now, I personally was born with Mercury retrograde. I've been a communicator all my life. I worked in the communication business. I worked in the training business. I've written 2 books. I don't think that's held me back so far. And indeed, my Mercury is in Aries, and that's quick. It's speedy, it's quick, but it's not necessarily deep. And because it's retrograde, that very positively, I believe, makes me think deeper, go back over, think more, ruminate. It makes me more contemplative, if you like, more thoughtful than my otherwise speedy Mercury in Aries would be. Yep, got it, I'm off to the next thing. So I see it as a great blessing. I have 6 retrograde planets in my birth chart, and life is okay. There are no disasters. So everybody has got them pretty much, very rare not to, and it's an optical illusion. There's too much hype and craziness about it. And I think one of the reasons that often things do go wrong at Mercury retrograde, the printer goes wrong, computer doesn't work, is because people have anxiety about it. And so that anxiety and their frequency pulls those experiences towards them. And if they weren't uptight about it, you would just roll through it. I actually find Mercury retrograde very positive in terms of reworking things, which is what I've been doing with some of the videos.
Yeah. That's true, because whenever it comes to signing a contract or making decisions, and I don't know if this is because I know it's retrograde, I'm like, oh no, I've done, I've miscommunicated, do not make a decision, do not contact this person, I may say something wrong, it may come across wrong, and I always feel like it's Mercury retrograde, do not leave the house.
Yeah, which is, you know, there's just so much hype and fear around it. And I've done lots of big important things in my life at Mercury retrograde. You know, I just don't let it affect me because it just raises fear when no fear is necessary.
So what is your favorite part of astrology?
Oh, wow. Well, gosh, that's a big question too. More and more, I really am seeing that what is so important is your frequency. Now, your birth chart gives you your unique pattern for this lifetime, but it doesn't determine your consciousness, your frequency. You determine your level of consciousness. So, an analogy that I use in my first book, You Don't Really Believe in Astrology, Do You? Is that your birth chart is like your unique sheet of music. It will never be repeated in history again. It's completely unique to you. But we can choose to play it with a spoon on a rusty box, or we can play it with a London Philharmonic. We can have a little life, or we can have a magnificent life. And so our level of consciousness determines that. And, you know, I have many people at the moment, and I can't cope with the, you know, the workload of clients wanting sessions. But I think when people are in distress, when in a very difficult situation, they think, I want my chart done. I'll get fixed. You know, I'll get fixed by that. You won't get fixed. It will give you much greater self-understanding. But what will fix you is changing your frequency from misery to joy. And I was just talking yesterday, actually, on the video, the update video I put out, that if I'm ever getting on a kind of negative run of thought about something that's worrying me, I will just see a big red stop sign in front, like a traffic sign. And I'll just say to myself, just stop it. Just stop it. And I'll think of the birds, I'll look at the sunshine, look at the trees, I'll think of my, you know, my pets, my children, you know, whatever, people I love. I will just flick my energy state to something positive instantly. It's like a default now. I will not allow myself to go on a run of negative thinking, because the only person it hurts is me. So it's keeping your vibration high. And in my second book, I talk about loads of ways to do that, very simple ways, actually. I mean, there's access is a health modality that many of my friends are involved in. And one phrase that they use a lot, and I have to credit them with it, is, how does it get any better than this? And that's a phrase I use all through my day. I will just remind, how does it get any better than this? Because it reminds you to express gratitude and to raise your frequency. So there are lots of really, really simple ways to do it. But frequency is way more important than the pattern in your birth chart. I mean, Hitler had quite a decent birth chart. You know, he was a steady old Taurus with a very kind, fair-minded Libran ascendant. You know, he had a really nice chart, if you hadn't known it was Hitler's. So
I wouldn't think Hitler. I would think he would have a lot of anger and a lot of Aries.
Well, there was some of that, but actually a lot of it was ruled by Venus. You know, his sun and his ascendant were ruled by Venus. So it's not the pattern, it's the frequency. And that's really, you know, sorry, it's a very long answer to your question, but that's more and more and more where I'm headed, because you won't get fixed by a chart session. You will get greater self-understanding. It will not fix your life, which is, I think, often what people expect. You will fix your life by changing your frequency. And increasingly, that's where I'm headed, and how we create our reality day to day, and how we can use astrology as a strategic tool of self-knowledge to find opportune times to take certain decisions in certain areas of life, so the cosmic winds are behind us, but nevertheless keeping our frequency high the whole time. That's the deal. That's the focus.
Wow, that blows me again. Wow, you are full of so much.
Sorry, very long answer.
You know, maybe you should do this little series on Netflix, and I'll be constantly hooked on a Sunday watching you, you know. That's another good answer. Thank you so much. Lastly, before we go, I was really looking forward to this. And I even saw my little astrology pendant today.
Fabulous.
So I was really wanting to ask you this last question, because I love the moon. I'm a moon worshipper. I do love the moon. I can lay out at night on my bed and I can look through the window and the moon can put me to sleep. why does the moon have such a big effect on? Because everything I feel governed is by the moon, and I don't know if that is possibly because I am a moon child, and I have looked where the moon falls on my birth chart. Yeah, so how does the moon govern us? Why are we so drawn to the moon?
Well, if you're a Cancer, you said you're Cancer sun.
Yeah.
I mean, that is ruled by the moon. Cancer is the sign that's ruled by the moon. But sensitive people in general, very often they're Cancer ascendant or Cancer sun because of the moon's rulership of that sign. But very often they're just psychic sensitive people, I find, are incredibly sensitive to the moon cycle. I mean, many of us have trouble sleeping in the last few days before the full moon. I have a lot of trouble sleeping then. A lot of sensitive and psychic people have downloads of information coming in. It's almost like the veil is thinner. And the moon, the full moon or a lunar eclipse is the peak of the moon cycle. So emotions are running high, feelings are running high, and certainly of all of the planets, the moon is the only one that actually is close enough to have a gravitational pull. And if you look at what happens at supermoons, look at the effect on the tides, where we get spring tides, and all sailors know that, tides are extremely high. If it can have that kind of huge pull on the tides, and often you get earth shifts, at the time of supermoons, if it can have that power on the earth and the tides, imagine the power that it can have on our psyche. So the moon is unique amongst the planets we call sun and moon planets in astrology, in that it has this strong gravitational pull as well as a psychic pull. And I think that's the reason many people feel it so strongly.
Okay, that's a pretty good answer as well. So I think you covered one of your answers that you gave me an insight to my next question, because when a lot of people are going through like a healing crisis or an identity crisis, naturally they're drawn to going with therapy, whether it's going to an astrologist or whether it's going for some form of healing, thinking that this is the answer that they've been waiting for to heal. But like you said, this is just a portal to give you understanding, almost like a vessel for you to have an understanding, but it will not cure your problems.
Yes, and understanding is part of the journey. Making things that were unconscious conscious is very often the first step of the journey. I mean, one of the wonderful things, I mentioned this in a recent video about astrology, is when I'm looking at a birth chart, at the same moment, I'm looking at a map of the heavens and the inner psyche of that person. So before they come to me, I will know the recent experiences they've had in their marriage or with their children or with their work or with their health, because I can see that very easily. So when they come to me and say, it's jolly bad luck, this has happened in life and this has happened in life and this has happened in life, I say, well, it isn't just jolly bad luck. This is coming from you because it's coming from within the birth chart, and that's what you're broadcasting to the world at these particular times. So if you can raise the frequency of that, you will change the quality of those experiences. So that, Carl Gustav Jung was an astrologer. Not many people know that. And his whole theory of synchronicity was based on astrology, that the outer is simply a mirror of the inner. And so, yes, it will help your healing in terms of making what was unconscious conscious, but then I'm not an energy worker or a healer myself. They would then, have to take those other steps and see people like your good self to work at a different level. But it's certainly a very important step in terms of the understanding. Yes.
Oh, okay. I understand. Wow. So do you feel like a lot of things, is there a difference to why the Earth is going through such a major shift? Because do you agree that this year, and I'm not sure because I had a conversation with another astrologist who's also a numerologist, but she said this year in astrology is the year for almost learning lessons. Would you agree? Would you think that this is why the Earth and the world is going through such a shift?
I don't know if I'd put it that way, because I think learning lessons is much more of an individual thing. But for sure, since May, I mean, we've had some massive aspects this summer. Apart from 3 eclipses, you know, the most powerful lunar eclipse of the century, we've also had, firstly, Uranus moving into Taurus, which it did in May. And at the same time, on the day, it came into a tight square with Mars. Now, Mars is, you know, is anger, heat, fires. Uranus is sudden. Uranus in Taurus is extreme climate, extreme weather events. And we look at what's happened with the fires in California, in Europe, in Greece. I mean, the fires all over that. We've had the drought in Australia, the worst drought in, I think, a century. We had the global heat wave. It was even in areas like Siberia. I mean, you know, a lot of heat-related deaths across the world. That was record-breaking. And that was very much correlated with that Mars-Uranus square. Mars was also at its closest point to the Earth in late July, early August. It was at only 35 million miles away as opposed to 140 million miles away. So it was physically much closer. And what was happening with the weather was exactly reflecting that symbolism. Now, Mars will start to move on in October. We've still got another month of it, but it'll start to move on in October. But Uranus, apart from a short dip back into Aries, November to March, Uranus stays in Taurus till 2026. We have only just begun the extreme Earth changes. We have only just begun. And many spiritually evolved people believe that these huge extreme events on the Earth, yes, it's very related to Uranus in Taurus, but it is also a reflection of our level of consciousness. And that if we had less anger and less division and less polarity, that the events wouldn't be as extreme as they have been, and maybe in the future. So it is a reflection of, again, of our collective consciousness globally. So the more we can do to be loving, to be kind, to be peaceful, it isn't just affecting our own reality, it's putting a drop in the ocean of the collective consciousness.
Wow, okay. That is a great answer to end this. Thank you so much for that answer. That makes me understand why our summer's coming to an end as well. We did have a major heat wave almost, like in May, you know. It does make me understand quite a lot of stuff. So what is upcoming in your, calendar in this upcoming year and two?
Right. I mean, there's a lot happening with the 2 books. As I said, I'm putting out these tutorial videos probably tomorrow on relationship, but they are more advanced. I'm planning probably sort of turn of the year, to be honest, to put out more tutorial videos. And I want to do more of that and probably pulling back on the client work just to kind of catch my breath and get some time and space in my life. And I may do more writing. It's something I love to do, but increasingly I think I'm going to be teaching via the videos and possibly via webinars as well, because I've been blessed in my astrological studies to have world-class teachers, absolutely gold standard teachers. And I'd like to put some of that back to the world as a legacy, really.
Wow, that's amazing. That's beautiful. Pam, I'm so happy that we could have been here together. And I enjoyed this little session we had so much. Thank you so much. I've learned so much from you. And this interview, I'm going to be watching it over and over and over. You have a lovely, lovely energy about you. And I can see why people are so drawn to wanting to work with you and be busy. So thank you so much for sharing space with me today.
Thank you. Namaste. It's been a real joy, real pleasure. And have a wonderful day. And yes, I'm always happy to talk about astrology. It's a beautiful, underestimated modality that helps us raise our consciousness too.
Wow, thanks. So we can just keep watching you on YouTube and see what comes out next. So,
yes.
Yeah, and where can we keep up to date? Where are your platforms? And I believe that's Facebook and YouTube. Is that right?
I do a lot on Facebook, and if you go onto my website pamgregory.com, there's loads on there. All my YouTube videos, all my products, my tutorial videos, and it has a Facebook icon there. And if you just click on that, that will link you into my Facebook page. I'm most active on Facebook, a bit on Twitter, but mostly Facebook. And I put up blogs probably 3 times a week on something that I'm thinking about, in either globally or personally, and people find those blogs very helpful, I think.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much once again. Thanks for sharing space.
Wonderful to spend time with you, Layla. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.